So good morning, everybody. Welcome to Buddhism for Daily Life, coming to you from Vajrayana. So I hope everybody's well and happy and ready to explore a little bit more about the topic of karma. But before we begin, let's set a positive motivation, opening our hearts to all beings, recalling that just like us, everybody wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer. And with that in mind, thinking that whatever benefit I get from this morning, may it be not only for myself, but for everyone I come into contact with. And of course, those of us who have entered the Bodhisattva, taken the Bodhisattva vows, we have the wish that everything we do becomes a cause for us to become ever closer to our goal of enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So just taking a little bit of time to make your motivation as sincere as possible, heartfelt. In this context, we can think about our response when we see people suffering, and we can think about how we have the wish for them not to suffer. I think that's our innate loving kindness and compassion that responds in this way. So let's take a little bit of time to settle the body and to let go of any tension, beginning at the top of the head, moving down over the face, being aware of any areas of tension. And allowing them to leave the body with the out-breath. So our face should feel soft, relaxed, tension-free. Relaxing all those little muscles around the eyes, around the mouth. Relaxing the jaw. Resting the tongue lightly behind the top teeth. Moving down the back of the head. The base of the skull, the neck. Tops of the shoulders. Checking the shoulder blades. moving down the spine, all the way to the base of the spine. Feeling the body's contact with the chair or the cushion. Coming back to the tops of the shoulders and moving down the front of the body. To the abdomen, to the belly. Releasing, relaxing. Experiencing the stability of the body. Its calmness, peacefulness. Feeling that the body is safe and supported. Traveling from the shoulders down to the elbows, to the wrists, to the hands. Resting the hands one on top of the other, right on top of left in the lap, or palm down on your thighs or your knees. Being aware of the back of the hands and the palms of the hands and the fingertips. Experience the feeling of the body relaxed, supported. Then move from the hip joints down to the knees. And from there down to the ankles. Tops of the feet, soles of the feet, toes. And now focus on the body as a whole. Be aware of the body from the top of the head to the tips of the toes. Breathing normally and naturally. And just taking a few moments to check for any other areas of tension that you may have missed. And letting that tension go with the out-breath. No rush, no pressure, just in your own time, relaxing and releasing any tension. Now moving on to some breathing meditation. So as we all know, our task is to keep the awareness with the breath, doing our best to be aware of the whole of the in-breath and the whole of the out-breath. And if thoughts come up, simply noticing them, neither following them nor pushing them away, but bringing the awareness back again and again to the breath, focusing either at the nostrils or at the abdomen and noticing the rise and the fall of the abdomen that occurs with the in-breath and the out-breath. Every time the mind wanders, bring it back to focus on the breath. So, time to have a little stretch, a little sip of a nice hot drink. So during these Wednesday classes, we've been exploring the 4 points that turn the mind towards the Dharma, the spiritual path. And the first one was the fact that we have this amazing human body and human mind. So we're able to understand the teachings of the Buddha. We have an interest in the teachings of the Buddha. We've found we have connections with valid teachers. I'm just a conduit. My wisdom comes from my teachers. And there's nothing that prevents us from following the path if we want to. If we remember, there's a lot more points in that, but just basically we're acknowledging and rejoicing in the fact that we're human beings with human intelligence, and therefore for a whole lot of other factors coming together, we're able to follow the teachings of the Buddha for the benefit of ourselves and others. However, the next point that comes along is death and impermanence. And while we do have this precious human rebirth, we don't know how long we're going to have it for, so we shouldn't waste time. And then the third point, which this is probably the second or the third week that we've moved into karma, because it's a very complex topic, and it's important to get a handle on the basics. So this class, when it's happening at the centre, of course it's very interactive, and it's quite difficult with YouTube to be very interactive, but I encourage you to ask questions. And as I always say, there is no such thing as a silly question. So please, if you've got any questions on what we've covered in the past, please bring them up, and I'll do my best to answer them. And we're hoping that next week we will be able to have this Wednesday morning class on Zoom, and there it will be a lot easier to be interactive. But please, any questions are most welcome. So just let's do a little recap about the general aspects of karma. And the first one was the certainty of karma. So karma, of course, means actions. It literally means action. It also refers to cause and effect. And on the more subtle level, it refers to the intention behind the action. So the certainty of karma is referring to the fact that a negative action will bring a negative result, and a positive action will bring a positive result. And that is always 100% certain. It's like, so karmic actions performed with intention leave imprints on our mind stream, and those imprints can be, an analogy for those imprints can be a seed. So we know, if we're looking at the certainty, if we plant, if we plant corn, we're going to get corn. If we plant, it doesn't matter, if we plant an acorn, it's going to grow into an oak tree. It can't possibly grow into a willow tree. So karma is certain. The second point is that karma increases. So just as one acorn can give rise to an oak tree, and that oak tree can give rise to many more acorns and many more oak trees, and eventually you have a forest, in the same way, karma increases if we don't do anything to prevent that. The third point is if there is not an action done, there will not be a result. So if we don't plant a seed, nothing will grow. That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Now, the fourth point is quite interesting because the karmic seeds on our mind stream don't have a use-by date. So any karmic action, any action that leaves an imprint, if that imprint stays there until it's destroyed, or if it's not destroyed, eventually, given the right conditions, it will ripen into suffering or happiness, depending upon the intention behind the action. So they're important points to understand. And then we moved on to look at what is called throwing karma. So throwing karma needs to be complete. Remember, we took killing as an example. So there has to be an object. With killing, the object is any other living being. There has to be the intention. So you discriminate. You in a way discriminate. So you know that you're going to kill a certain person or animal. Yeah. So that's part of the intention. Yeah. And then you have a motive. So you have a state of mind where you fully intend to kill a living being. Yeah. And then it is that motivation in the case of negative karma is driven by delusion. So the delusion can be anger or attachment or ignorance. Then there's the actual act of killing and the completion. So if all of these factors are not in place, that action doesn't become powerful enough to propel you into a future rebirth. It doesn't mean that there are no consequences of that action. It just means that it doesn't become what is called a throwing karma. So I hope that's not too confusing. Again, so in the three non-virtues of mind, is that thinking only negative karma against yourself and not against others, as there is no action? So I think the non-virtue of mind here is malice, having malicious thoughts. Yeah. So karma covers actions of body, speech, and mind. So if you're having a malicious thought with regard to yourself, that is also creating negative karma. If you're having a malicious thought with regard to others, that is still negative karma. So there's not a physical action, but there's a mental action. Does that answer your question? Yes, so the question about throwing karma is, does a throwing karma throw you into another life if it is really bad? So from the Buddhist point of view, there are past lives and future lives, and a throwing karma that is powerful enough to propel you to another life can be either positive or negative. So if it's a positive throwing karma, then it's very likely that you will again take a human rebirth and be able to continue along the spiritual path that you were on in this life. Does that make sense? Yeah, so in other words, a positive throwing karma will throw you into a good rebirth, and a negative throwing karma will throw you into a not so positive rebirth. The good news is, as the Buddha said, the only good thing about negativities is that they can be purified. But of course, it's better not to create them in the first place. So this whole thing with throwing karma, I know it sounds a little bit complex. I'm just trying to look at what I call the 4 branches again. So, pardon me, there has to be the intention to kill or steal or lie. Then there's the actual action itself, yeah? And then, hang on, I've skipped a bit here. So first of all, there's the intention. There's the object, sorry. I'm going cross-eyed here. I've got, I suffer from blepharitis, and it causes my vision to be a bit blurred when I'm reading the page. Anyhow, let's look at the action of stealing, just to clarify these 4 branches. First of all, there's the object. Yeah, so you decide to steal something. Then there's the intention to steal. Then there's the actual act of stealing, and then there's the completion. So whatever the action is, for it to be powerful enough to throw us, to propel us to our next life, it needs to have those 4 branches: an object, an intention, the action, and the completion. What makes it a little bit complicated, but we don't have to worry too much about that, is that the intention itself is made up of different parts. So we discriminate, we decide what we're going to steal. We have a motive, so we really intend to steal, and we're motivated by delusion, and then we perform the act. So those 4 branches again: an object, an intention, an action, and a completion of the action. So I hope that's clear. And if it's not, you need to let me know. Okay, so I wanted to look at, I want to look at a few other things with karma. I mean, it is said in the teachings that only a Buddha can understand the intricacies of karma. So for us, we need to understand, if you like, the mechanism, how it works. And that's all that we need in order to use our understanding of karma to live a life that where we do our best not to harm others and to help others instead. So negative karma, negative karma becomes heavier for a few different reasons. So let's look at the weight, of negative karma. The degree and duration of suffering that you will experience as a result of negative karma depend on how heavy the negative causal action is. So, firstly, there's heaviness according to the nature of the non-virtuous action. Yeah. So it depends upon the degree of harm inflicted on the object. Actions of body are heavier than those of speech, and they, in turn, are heavier than actions of the mind. The non-virtues of the body are heaviest because they harm sentient beings directly. So killing is heavier than stealing, which is heavier than sexual misconduct. The worst action of speech is lying. Then there's divisive speech, harsh speech, and gossip. Yeah. Within the non-virtues of mind, wrong views is the heaviest, because if we're not going to follow the path. All of these teachings are in the context of somebody who has committed themselves to the path. So if we have wrong views and we say, I don't believe what the Buddha taught, I don't believe in karma, I don't believe that enlightenment is possible, then, we just stop. We don't follow the path. So wrong views, heavier than malice and covetousness. So there's also heaviness with regard to the object. The more highly developed the object of our actions, the heavier the karma we create. That makes sense, doesn't it? So if we create non-virtue in relation to a Buddha, that's very heavy and the most serious negative karma. So then comes negative actions in relation to the bodhisattvas and so on, ordinary humans, and then animals, and further on down the list. Also, the greater the kindness others have shown us, the heavier negative karma we create by harming them. That makes sense, doesn't it? So if there's somebody who's been incredibly kind to us and we then turn around and harm those people, that is heavier negative karma than if we harmed a stranger, for example. So it's heavier negative karma to steal from your parents. Yeah. So then there's heaviness according to the intention. An action carries karmic weight depending on which of the delusions are present and their intensity. If you kill with intense hatred, it's much heavier than killing with anger, which itself is heavier than killing by accident. A person who does not wish to kill but is forced to do so creates much less negative karma than a soldier who kills with hatred. In this way, the negative karma from harsh speech, if motivated with intense hatred, can be heavier than killing. The fourth point is heaviness according to the means. A non-virtue can be performed by a variety of means that may increase or decrease the amount of suffering experienced by the object. The greater the suffering inflicted on the object, the heavier the weight of the negative karma. It is lighter negative karma to kill an animal instantly with a clean shot than to slowly skin it alive. There are cultures where people roast animals alive and so on, and do terrible things, cut a piece of flesh each day from a living turtle. These kinds of things, like boiling lobsters alive, create very heavy negative karma. Then there's heaviness according to the frequency. An action performed again and again becomes heavy by repetition. Continuum of non-virtue is established, and each repetition adds to the karmic weight. So, for example, a serial killer creates heavier karma than a person who kills only once. The continuous intention to constantly kill and harm others accumulates negative thoughts and actions, which progressively add more energy to each other. This is the same for all non-virtues. So it makes sense, doesn't it? So the karma also becomes heavier if we don't oppose it. So here we're talking about how karma increases, yes. If a negative action is not purified, it continues to increase in strength. By not applying an opponent to the negativity, an otherwise insignificant action can become very heavy. If you have no regret for your negative actions, they constantly gain strength. Whereas, by the power of regret and purification, the continuity of the negativity is stopped. So it's very, very important to have regret and engage in some kind of purification practice. So I think all these points make sense, don't they? So let's look at some of the other things. I don't want to overwhelm you, because there's, as I said, there's so many things around karma, and it can become very, very complex. And I don't want to burden you with more than we need to bring our understanding of karma into our lives. I wanted to explain a little bit about throwing karma and completing karma. So if we look at throwing karma, let's say, this is the karma that throws us into, let's say, for example, our next rebirth. And then karuna, yes. What I will probably do next week, because a few people I think are quite interested in learning purification practice, I will teach a simple purification practice that you can all do. In the interim, the most powerful thing that you can do is to regret any negative actions that you have engaged in. So at the end of the day, and I don't want guilt here, throw that word away. Apparently there's no Tibetan word for guilt. Have sincere regret for whatever negative actions that you have engaged in. And make a promise, to your higher self, to the Buddha, whatever you feel comfortable with, make a promise not to do that negative action again. And stick to that promise to the very, very best of your ability. That's what we can do, each day. I hope that makes sense. Hi, Robin. Yes, you see, this concern, of course, unfortunately, particularly, as we get older and our eyesight is not good, we do have to clean. We do have to clean. I mean, there's no way around it. So we do the best that we can in all of our activities to not harm other living beings. However, because, this is not a pure land, we are in samsara, which doesn't mean we should be sloppy, but it is impossible to live our lives without harming others, other living beings. Sometimes we harm human beings with our actions, with our words. Sometimes we don't even intend to. And so, we do the very, very best we can, and we purify. We can, if we're totally committed to the path, we can think, may any sentient being that I accidentally killed or harmed, when I become a Buddha, may they become my closest disciples. There's a lot of things we can do like that. And it's not being flippant. It's acknowledging that this is not a perfect world, and we're doing the best we can to avoid harm. So we have to come back to that more subtle understanding of karma, which is talking about intention. So a karmic action that we engage in without an action that we engage in, because karma is action, I'm kind of doubling a word there, but an action that we engage in without intention, it still has a result, but it's not very powerful. And by having genuine regret, we reduce the power of that negative action. Does that make sense? When I lived up at Chenrezig, it's a very large centre, and it's out in the bush. And, sometimes we had to cut trees down. We just had to. We needed the space, I remember only one in particular, I think, that we had to cut down. So, we went and we spoke to Geshe-la, and Geshe-la came down and he did some prayers, and he encouraged any of the sentient beings living in that tree to please move away. And then with great regret, we cut the tree down. So we have to work with where we are. When we become Buddhas, we won't have these problems. So in the meantime, we do the best we can, and we don't intentionally harm any living beings. So the throwing karma is the karma that it has all of those 4 branches that I talked about. And let's say, for example, that our throwing karma throws us into a doggy rebirth, right? So it's not very good to be a dog from the point of view of our spiritual practice. Then comes the completing karma. So the completing karma is, on a very basic level, it's about the environment and the conditions that we're born into. So you can have negative throwing karma and positive completing karma. So if you're born as a puppy dog, you would have negative throwing karma, but then you could have positive completing karma, and you could be the Queen's Corgi. Okay? Or you could have positive throwing karma and you'd be born a human being, but then you could have negative completing karma and be born in a country where there's a lot of war or famine. And this is one example of how complex karma is. And like I said, if, only a Buddha can understand the intricacies. But what I'm hoping to, give to the class is enough understanding of the functioning of karma to be able to inform us in the way we live our lives. Are there any other questions? So let's just look at a little bit more about, here we're talking about the results of negative karma. As I said, we begin by focusing on this because we don't want the results of negative karma. So it's important to know what happens when we engage in negative actions. So the first is called the ripened effect. And this refers to, here we're talking about, is the future rebirth state you will experience as a result of having created a complete karma. Okay? A complete karma. This is with those 4 branches. So there are 3 possible rebirth states that can result from non-virtue. So you can be born in what Buddhism calls a hell realm, where, the suffering is really intense, or in the realm of what are called hungry spirits, hungry ghosts, which is a little bit like, the words that are used have been translated, and it's sometimes very difficult to find a good, explanation of what that means. So hungry spirits, hungry ghosts are constantly in a state of dissatisfaction, can never find what they want. They're traditionally depicted as beings who are continuously hungry and thirsty, but they have very, very thin necks and very huge bellies, and they can never quench their thirst or assuage their hunger. And then there's an animal rebirth. So the realm in which you will be reborn depends on the strength of the karma, and so on. Yeah. Generally, extreme anger brings rebirth in the hell realms, attachment in the hungry ghost realms, and ignorance in the animal realms. So this is called the ripened effect, in dependence upon having created very heavy negative karma, complete with the 4 branches, and not having purified it and not having regretted it, not having done anything about those negative actions, then you can be reborn in these lower realms. So that's the ripened effect. That's the result of the throwing karma. Then there's the effect similar to the cause. So this has 2 parts. And the first is the experience similar to the cause. So these effects come into fruition after you have experienced the fully ripened effect, which is, the effect of the throwing karma. For example, if you were reborn in a hell realm as a result of killing, when that karma was eventually exhausted, you might then be reborn in an upper realm. And in that rebirth, you would have a habitual desire to kill. You would instinctively behave in that way. And this is the tendency similar to the cause. The experience similar to the cause is that you would also be killed when the circumstances arose, right? So you have an experience similar to the cause, and you also have, if you were somebody who, say you were a mercenary, right? So you would be reborn in a hell realm, and then you could be reborn in an upper realm, and you would have the habitual desire to kill because you have that tendency. And then you would also be killed whenever the circumstances for that to happen arose. Then there's the environmental effect, which I kind of referred to previously as like, completing karma, throwing karma and completing karma. So the environmental effect, even having experienced the rebirth state according to the fully ripened effect of the karma, some of the energy of that karma will remain. This will manifest in circumstances experienced in your human life, such as living in a harsh, barren and violent place as a result of killing. So it's all quite logical, isn't it? You become habituated to killing, then you're reborn somewhere where you will, when the conditions arrive, you will be killed. And because you've habituated yourself to killing, that tendency to kill is still there with you. So I find that easier to talk about those two in the context of throwing karma, and that the environmental part is throwing karma, and the environment is the completion karma. So with the throwing karma, it kind of built into that is that tendency. For example, if you were a mercenary, you have that tendency to kill. It's always there, even after you've fallen into one of the lower realms due to your throwing karma. And eventually that karma of being in the lower realms is used up, and then you're in a human realm again, but the tendency to kill is still there, and you will be killed when the conditions come together. So, it sounds pretty heavy. And this is, when the Buddha talked about all these realms, as you move into, where was I going with that? As you learn more and more about the teachings, in the kind of, in the, let's say, kind of preliminary teachings, that's not exactly the word I'm looking for, but I think you'll get what I mean. The Buddha taught to people who were uneducated, couldn't read or write, and so on. So when he talked about the different realms, they were talked about as if they were actual places. The hell realms, well, we can see the animal realms and so on. As we go deeper and deeper into the teachings, all of these realms are seen as states of mind, which is a whole different ballgame. But that state of mind that you're in, you believe it. We are in a state of mind, we're in samsara, and samsara is a state of mind. It's a state of mind which is controlled at the moment by karma and delusion. And whatever we experience, it seems very real to us, just like a dream. When you're having a dream, those dream experiences seem real, but they're not. So however you want to look at these realms, the hell realms, we can see somebody who is hopelessly addicted is actually in a hell realm. I mean, we can see that. We can see parallels for these realms here in the world. So I see there's some more questions here. There's some good questions here. Okay, Robin is asking, does eating fish and meat create negative karma? The actual eating itself. Here we come to this whole topic of vegetarianism and so on. So if we're Buddhists and we ascribe to non-harm, then when we eat meat, if we're having a lamb chop, we're not eating a live lamb, are we? That lamb had to be killed so that we could eat the lamb chop. So I think, eating a sentient being creates negative karma. What happened in the time of the Buddha was, of course, people didn't have refrigerators, and so, if you wanted to eat a chicken or a lamb, or you had to ask somebody, unless you were a butcher yourself, you had to ask somebody to kill that chicken so you could eat it. So technically, when they're talking about the negative karma, they say, well, I did not personally ask anybody to kill that lamb so that I could eat it. So that, 2,600 years ago, that's what would have happened. Now, by buying meat or fish or the flesh of any sentient being, when we buy that, we are virtually perpetuating the slaughter of animals. So my own thought would be that there is negative karma there, because, as I say, we don't eat the animals alive, we get somebody else to kill them. And I believe that His Holiness Karmapa talks about the negative karma of eating sentient beings. And of course, within Buddhism, we talk about how, because we've had countless lifetimes, we've been around since beginningless time, everybody on the planet has been our kind mother or our father or our best friend at some point, because we've had so many lives. And even, an animal at some point has been our kind mother. So His Holiness the Karmapa, I don't know if I can find the post anymore, but you would be able to find it. But he's saying to Buddhists, well, if you want to eat meat, sit down and think very, very carefully if you are prepared to eat your kind mother. So think about it. We're not about, the Buddha didn't prohibit the eating of meat. In fact, monastics are, we take whatever people offer us in terms of food. And most people assume that we're vegetarian, but I recently visited a friend, and she had a neighbour who brought over a beautiful meal for us because she knew we were travelling, and it was roast pork. So, of course, I didn't want to hurt that lady's feelings. I hadn't eaten meat for I don't know how many years, but, of course, I thanked her very much, and I prayed for the pig and I ate the meat. So, we ourselves have to decide what we're going to do in the context of whether or not we eat the flesh of sentient beings. It's up to us. To me, I personally can't do that. I can't. I've been vegetarian for a long time, and I'm moving very much into veganism too now, because you see, things were very different in the time of the Buddha. The suffering involved with commercial dairy and meat and poultry and fishing is just, inconceivable. So I think a lot of people don't want to know about it. Inform yourselves and then make a decision. Okay. So the karma can be exhausted, but the habit remains until you do something about it. Yes, Karina. So the habit. Okay. If we become habituated to killing's very heavy, isn't it? But it's because it's heavy, it's a good one to stay with. If we become habituated to killing, then that habit will stay with us. Now, you can see with children, some quite young children are quite cruel, and their parents, well, we think, I don't know, I don't have enough, haven't done specific research into this, but it's not necessarily that they've been taught to be cruel by their parents, because you can have siblings and one can be quite cruel and the other one can be quite kind and so on. So from the Buddhist point of view, that habit of killing is still there on the mind stream. That's the way that Buddhism would look at it. So if we are fortunate enough to, at some point in our lives, come to understand the incredible suffering that comes about from killing, for that being that is killed, something needs to happen. Something needs to trigger our loving kindness and compassion. And then we would see that habit as detrimental and horrible. We just wouldn't want to do it. So, yes, I guess the whole thing about, coming into contact with some kind of spiritual path is very important for us then to work to overcome our negative habits. And so that's what would happen, if we're fortunate enough to come into contact with the teachings. And, Christianity also teaches, of course. I think all the great religions teach us to be kind. Whether that necessarily extends to animals or not is a moot point. I'm not sure. I'm not very learned in that. But I think that what happens is our innate goodness is covered over by our delusions. And the stronger the delusions, the harder it is for that innate goodness to shine out. From the point of view of the Buddhist path, as we move along the path and we contemplate suffering, we recoil from, any kind of deed that causes suffering to others. And in that way, we can get rid of the habit, because the habit of killing comes from a non-virtuous mind state. It comes from anger or hatred, or, some people have very distorted minds and they delight in killing. So there's something wrong mentally there. And that becomes another more complex topic. But as ordinary people, if we come to understand that harming others is not beneficial, and it is where the understanding of karma can help, because when we harm others, if we understand that we also harm ourselves, beginning with purely selfish reasons, we will refrain from harming others. It's quite complex, and but the principles are simple. We see that harmful actions cause suffering, and so we refrain. As we move along the path, we're developing our loving kindness and our compassion, and also our wisdom. And when we have what is called a direct realization of emptiness, a direct realization of how things actually exist, then all of our negative karma, all of the imprints, all of the tendencies are completely destroyed. That's a very long-term goal, but we can work on it day by day. It's been a bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope that makes sense. Good. Yes, years and years and years of study, and I myself am constantly learning. And I think, just like with our breathing meditation, the more we do it, the better we get at it. And the more we study, the deeper our understanding. And it's very important to study, but it's just as important to put what we have understood into practice to the very best of our ability each and every day. So there's a lot of emphasis on study, and we shouldn't disregard study. It's very, very, very important, and to look deeper and deeper into the teachings, as I said before, and we get more and more understanding. I think in the West there's so much admiration for intellectual ability that sometimes we can be stuck there. Oh yes, I understand that. And then we kind of stop. And we miss the very, very, very important point that whatever we've understood needs to be put into practice. So this is my theme song, I guess. Those of you who know me will be thinking, there she goes again. But, it's like we need both. We definitely need to study. And just as much as we need to study, we need to put what we've learned into practice. So are there any more questions? Are there anything that's not clear? I'll do my best to help with that, if that is the case. So to help us in our practice, it's good to have a list of the 10 non-virtues. So that, when you wake up in the morning, you can set your motivation. I mean, some of you may have your own practices, your own commitments that you're already doing. But if you're new to all this, you can have that list of the 10 non-virtues, and you wake up in the morning and you think, how wonderful. I have this amazing, precious human rebirth, and I can use it to benefit myself and others. So today I will do my best to refrain from all of the 10 non-virtues. In fact, I will try to engage in their opposites, and I will help others as much as I can. And then at the end of the day, as I said, you kind of review your day. You regret your non-virtuous actions, and next week we'll learn the purification practice. You purify them, and you dedicate the merit of all your positive actions to your attainment of enlightenment or to the happiness and well-being of everybody on this planet. So, Carolyn, in regards to positive karma. Okay, this is very interesting. So, positive karma works exactly the same way as negative karma. I remember in my early days at Chenrezig, somebody asked our Geshe, how do prayers help sentient beings? And if I remember correctly, Geshe said that what happens when we pray is that the prayer, that's a positive mind state, isn't it? So prayer activates the positive karma in the minds of people that we're praying for. Does that kind of make sense, positive. And, even if we don't believe in prayer, I think it's much better to send out positive vibes than negative vibes. And I think there has been quite a lot of research done proving that prayer helps, whether the recipient, so to speak, knows that you're praying for them or not. Because we all have a mixture of karmic imprints on our mind stream. So anybody we pray for doesn't have a mind stream that's full of only negative karmic imprints. That person also has positive karmic imprints. And our prayers, our thoughts, the mind is not confined to the body. So our thoughts go out and they benefit. I think that we've all had experiences of somebody perhaps even on the other side of the world that we know very well, and suddenly we think of them, and the next thing is the phone rings and, there they are on the end of the line. So I think that's some proof of the incredible, power of the mind through time and space. Okay, I see we've got about another 4 minutes, so yes, feel free to ask any more questions. I'm just looking for my favourite dedication prayer again. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we're hoping to have these Wednesday classes on Zoom next week, so we'll be able to see one another and we'll be able to speak to one another. So that should make things simpler, and which a bit more of a sense of togetherness. And so I think you need to. It's quite easy to use Zoom. I think you need to download Zoom onto your computer, and then there's a password. Anyhow, we'll put all the information on the website. I'm not the techie person for that, but I spoke to our SPC this morning, and the information will be on our website about the next class, next Wednesday class. So the meditations are going to stay on YouTube, but the Wednesday class and the Saturday class at the end of the month, which is called like Buddhism from the Heart, I think, both of those are going to be on Zoom. So just check the website. Okay, thank you very much for being with me. And remember, if you're feeling a bit shaky about the results of negative karma, be good little girls and boys. No, remember that negative karma can be purified. Okay? And that's very important. So let's go to the dedication prayer from Shantideva. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing and the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain, to dispel the miseries of the world. So this is also one of His Holiness Dalai Lama's favourite dedications. I think it's very beautiful. It covers everything, really. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. And, check our program and tune in to whatever appeals to you. May you all be well and happy. Thanks again.